reading here from Psalm chapter 23, one that is all very well known, but this is taken from the Message translation. And it says, God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You have bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me in quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath and send me in the right direction. And when the way goes through Death Valley, I'm not afraid. When you walk at my side, your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head. My cup brings with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life. I'm back home in the house of God for the rest of my life. Amen.
Hi everyone, my name's Tash, and I have the privilege of sharing today for the first online Zoom message. So I've never done this before, so if it goes horribly wrong, I'm just going to blame Zoom and technology and pandemic and all sorts. It won't be my fault. But I've been asked to speak about fear and uncertainty, and they're kind of really familiar topics for me, just because of things that have happened, life experience, circumstances, especially over the past few years. So I'm really happy to kind of share some of my insights. But I think that for a lot of us, we're feeling the effects of this pandemic in different ways. And I think that for me, take something like anxiety and the grounding technique. What I've noticed is that it's not something that kind of happens once and then it's dealt with. It's something that I might have to deal with over and over again. And so I think that when we're facing this fear and these uncertain times, just be really kind to yourself, because none of this is kind of straightforward and linear. None of it's kind of deal with it once and then you kind of overcome it forever. Just be kind to yourself, and you might find yourself practicing things like the grounding technique, over and over again. But the things that we do in life that are really mundane that we wouldn't even think twice about have completely changed. For example, now when I go out, I make sure I've got a mask, I've got hand sanitizer. I make sure I've got simple things that, a few months ago, I wouldn't even have bothered taking with me at all. When I go back to school, I'm a teacher. When I go back in September, it's going to be really, really different. Not impossible, but completely different to anything that I've kind of had to deal with in my teaching career. And so I think our need for control is being really challenged by this pandemic. And we have these kind of unhelpful phrases, people thinking about getting back to normal and, the new normal. And the hard truth is normal is kind of dead, like normal is gone. And we're kind of, thinking on our feet and responding each day to the facts as they're presented to us. So I try to think, when was a time in my life that I felt completely certain about a situation? And I had to go back to 2017, probably about this time last year. About this time 3 years ago, 2017. And I was in what you call an atmosphere of faith. So those of you that might have a Pentecostal background, you know what I'm talking about. So an atmosphere of faith. I was at Barcelona's football stadium, and I managed to get cheap tickets for their charity trophy that they did every year. So got a really good seat, super cheap tickets. It was just good timing that I happened to be there when Barcelona were playing. And before kickoff, they started playing this song, and everyone was kind of singing along in Spanish. I didn't have a clue what they were saying. I did the Google afterwards to find out, and it turned out that before every game they sing this song called the Song of Barcelona. And it's the song that talked about how many goals they'd scored through history, all their accomplishments and their achievements that were all on display in their museum. And it was really strange to me because, as I've mentioned in the previous talk, I'm a Villa supporter. So to be at a football game and there being such expectation and certainty was really quite unsettling, because if you know anything about Aston Villa, you know that they're not singing songs about their greatness before kickoff. It's more like fingers crossed and let's see how badly this goes. So I have a few issues with certainty, as you may have guessed. A couple of years ago, I was at a previous church and I preached a sermon on doubt. And it was quite interesting for me because I think I touched on the scripture. I think it's 1 Corinthians 10:13, which talks about us not being tempted beyond what we can handle. And that, some of you may be aware, is badly paraphrased sometimes to something like, God won't give you more than you can bear. And so in this message a couple of years ago, I raised this. I talked about why it was really helpful if you believe the wrong thing about the Bible, and if you believe things like God won't give you more than you can bear. And I was speaking in the context of my own father dying almost 3 years ago after a really short and unexpected illness. He was a really healthy guy. He got sick. We thought he was getting better, and he died in the space of a week. So that kind of horrible experience obviously just shatters your understanding of certainty. At the same time, I've got a close friend, and her father just died, just heart attack, and that was it. He was gone. And someone else at my previous church that was close to, same thing with her husband. So when this lady came to me after the service and wanted to challenge me about, this notion that God won't give you more than you can bear, because she was quite upset. She was like, no, it's true. God will never give you more than you can handle. And I kind of had to say to her really gently, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree, because sometimes people do go through these awful, awful circumstances and suffer these really terrible losses, which really are quite unbearable. Losing control over a situation, someone dying unexpectedly, losing a job, being in the pandemic, really unfortunately, really sadly, we do go through these moments in our lives where we sit there and we're like, God, what on earth is going on? Like, I actually can't maybe deal with this. I'm not used to this particular situation. I'm really, really struggling. And for me personally, what I reflected on at that time was that so much Christian teaching, if it touches on suffering at all, it's more about trials. It's more about how to overcome and survive a particular test or trial. And it doesn't always deal with what happens when you face an absolute tragedy. And so as I share with you today, just for a few minutes, I just want to note that, these next few weeks and months are going to be full of unknowns and full of lots of uncertainty. And what we want to ask ourselves today is just the question, well, what do we do with uncertainty? And I just want to share a few thoughts with you along those lines. I think the first thing we have to do as people that are trying to follow Jesus is to just concede. We need to accept that we were never in control. And it makes me think back to an article that I read years ago, and it was called God is Merciful Not to Tell Us Everything. Like, the article wasn't very memorable, if I'm honest with you, but that title, God is merciful not to tell us everything, has just stuck with me. Another quote, which is going to be on the screen, is this one, and it's from, a controversial Bible teacher. You can ask me who it is afterwards. But this thought, which I think I saw years ago, maybe as far back as like 2012, God is always doing 10,000 things in your life. God is always doing 10,000 things in your life, and you may be aware of 3 of them. And so I think that at the same time we're facing all these unknowns through life, we've also got, God to hold on to, but also understand that there's so much we don't know about God. And I think the sheer scale of that quotation, I think is beautiful. I think it's powerful to know that where we're kind of running around thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on? To just consider that God is so powerful that He is, thinking these 10,000 things, doing these 10,000 things in your life. And right in front of you, you may be aware of just 3 of them. And I think that's an awesome thought, as in it's too big to get our minds around, but it's also, for me anyway, like a comforting thought. Like, I don't see the full picture, but God, I trust that you do, and that I may not be in control, but you are. I want to read to you Psalm 131 in the New Living Translation. It says, Lord, my heart is not proud, my eyes are not haughty. I don't concern myself with matters too great or too awesome for me to grasp. Instead, I've calmed and quieted myself like a weaned child who no longer cries for its mother's milk. Yes, like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord now and always. It's this idea that the weaned child knows that provision is coming, right? They know that food is coming, but it's going to take a different form to what they were used to. And I just love the simplicity of it. It's not, the most exciting or famous psalm in the Bible, but the idea of, I'm just not going to concern myself with things that are maybe too difficult for me to get a firm grasp of. It reminds me of Peter Enns in his book, The Sin of Certainty, which was covered in a book and a podcast club a good few months ago. But on page 139, he says, I don't claim to have the answer for many of the things that challenge my faith, but this I do believe. I see these moments are invitations to leave my comfort zone and trust God from a place of childlike vulnerability, rather than from a position of power and authority. And I wonder if anyone actually enjoys childlike vulnerability. I don't. I think through education and through our upbringings, we're kind of geared up to want to enjoy and embrace the kind of power and authority that he talks about there, the very thing that in a lot of situations we don't really have. The second thing I want to bring to you is just another thought, is that when we respond to uncertainty and fear, it's really important that we connect with God and with others, and that looks different to different people. But a few weeks after my dad died, I read a book called How to Survive a Shipwreck. It's a great book. I don't know if you can try the camera thing inspired by Ali and Ellie. Yeah, but it's a really fantastic book, because I think if you go through a difficult situation, like this is me anyway, if I go through a difficult situation, I want to hear from someone who's also gone through something difficult, because I know they're kind of going to be just speaking my language. And so this book was brilliant. And so I just want to read you a little bit from this book that stuck with me, because it's about food and I like food. So I'm going to read you a little section. He says, I'm a pretty big fan of the whatever it takes to get you through the night diet as well. Maybe you shouldn't have cheesecake every night forever, but if you would look forward to it, be fully present to it, and be grateful for it, let the cheesecake tether you again to what is good about the earth. Let the cheesecake make you believe in God again. And then the idea that there must still be something good left on earth, because of how good this cheesecake is tasting right now. Whatever meal would make you feel like giving thanks is provision that sinks you again to the provider. If it's between eating something you love and hating your life tonight, eat something good and make no apology for it. And if you need to be healthy to keep your strength up, to survive the shipwreck over the long haul, eat the cheesecake tonight and an apple in the morning and start over. Now is not the best time to agonize over the calorie count. To eat is to be human. To eat is to celebrate being alive, especially when you eat with other people. If there's a place you can go to be fed a meal and a person you know with whom you can enjoy a meal, this is no small part of what it takes to survive a shipwreck. And I remember reading that and just being so moved, because I felt like God knew that I needed to read that book, and God knew that I needed to hear those words, because my favorite dessert is cheesecake. And it's something so simple, but that helped me feel like I was tethered to God once again. And in those times of uncertainty and fear, what we need is that connection. We need that connection to Jesus. We need that connection to the people of Jesus. It's like in Psalm 23, which Pete read at the start. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And that idea that Jesus, he called himself the good shepherd. He's someone who's going to be looking out for us in all times, not just times of uncertainty. Bob Goff, who's another Christian writer, he said that God doesn't just give us promises, he gives us each other. It's not either or. It's not, do I need the people of Jesus, or do I just need Jesus? I think Jesus' intention is for us to be in community, because God moves in, in mysterious ways, and sometimes those mysterious ways are other people. The third thing I want to just give to you as a thought about how to respond to fear and uncertainty is that we need to also contend, right? We also need to fight. What I don't want to do is present you a how-to message, because, like I've already said, facing uncertainty and fear is never easy. But sometimes to get that peace, to help ourselves feel grounded again, to get a little bit of stability, even just for a moment, we've got to kind of fight for it. And that might be fighting, our normal responses, or fighting some negative thoughts in our minds. It might look different for different people. Sometimes it looks like standing still and doing nothing at all. Like, I think back to the really old hymn, Rock of Ages, and there's this verse that says, "Nothing in my hands I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. Naked, come to thee for dress, helpless, look to thee for grace." Sometimes we are not able to fight the good fight in strength. Sometimes we feel exhausted and we feel weak, but that's okay. Sometimes we need to lean on other people. It makes me think about the paralyzed man in the Gospels, where his friends carried him onto the roof, removed the roof, and lowered him so he could meet Jesus. Other people had to do the work, and he had to rely on those people to help him. It makes me think of the musical Hamilton, which I'm a little bit obsessed with, because it is just brilliant. But there's this really emotional song at the end, and one of the lines says, "There are moments that the words don't reach. There is suffering too terrible to name." And you know what? Sometimes we don't have the words ourselves. We've got nothing left. We're completely empty. And actually, to use the songs and prayers of others when we've got nothing left ourselves is so important. Like, I've literally got on my phone a playlist called Solid Rock Playlist, and it's just full of songs that are just, about how good God is and how powerful God is, because sometimes that's all I can do, just to listen to other people's words and feel a bit of strength and encouragement myself. So I think my time is almost up, and I have no idea, to be honest. But I want to kind of bring, this reflection to the close, which again is interesting because it's on Zoom. So how do you actually do that? But just by some way of closing before I hand back to Danielle, I just want to give you the encouragement that as we face all that is to come, and all the things that some of us were already dealing with before this time of uncertainty and fear, you can find some peace, and you can find some grounding, and you can find a way forward. But it's okay if you need to do the exact same things the next day and the next day and the next day, because there's no straight line through this crisis and this time. I want to close by reading you the lyrics of a song called Hidden by a band called United Pursuit. And it just says, "There was one when I was young. He knew my heart. He knew my sorrow. He held my hand and he led me to trust him. Now I am hidden in the safety of your love. I trust your heart and your intentions. Trust you completely. I'm listening intently. You'll guide me through these many shadows." Amen.